Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant. Joining me is the duo that makes the trio, Cammie and Peter. Hello, Peter.
Hello, sir.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
And Cammie, hello.
Hello, Bryant.
Welcome
Hello,
back.
Peter. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Cammie.
Happy birthday, Peter.
Thank you.
Yes, today is the celebratory Podicus, Magnus, anniversaire. That was French. I was trying to remember how to say year in Latin. I know anno. I don't know.
Annos, yeah.
Geburtstag in German.
Yeah, there we go. So, everyone, this is Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. Every week, we're going to find some kind of myth, legend, epic, or what have you, give you the story, and then give you some history to try and explain it. And this is a Podicus Magnus episode, which means that Peter's here, of course, and that's pretty much the only difference. The main show is me and Cammie. That's how it works, and we just get all nice and named up for when Peter comes and joins us. But yes, we have two birthdays. Happy birthday. You guys were both born in July, which this part of July, which means that you guys are Cancers.
Yes, not the fatal disease, but
no,
the mythological Zodiac character, creature.
With a strong, elegant story that we'll get into soon.
Oh, yes.
So that's what today's episode is. So we were discussing what we should talk about. The birthdays are coming up. We haven't touched on horoscopes. There's definitely a lot of myth there, especially like the zodiac signs. Their stories are really interesting, and I think that we're all kind of excited to get into it. So I know Cammie's going to lead off. Cammie, why don't you set us up with what's up?
Sure. So I am doing Leo the Lion, which is July 23rd through August 22nd. And I got my information from perseus.tufts.edu, and it was the Nemean Lion section. Leo was the first of Hercules' 12 laborers. King Eurystheus wanted its hide, and Hercules, wishing to atone for his sins, agreed. He arrived in Nemea and quickly began his quest. The animal he sought was no ordinary lion, fierce as ordinary lions are. No, this lion had an impenetrable hide. Hercules tracked the beast by finding its footprints and following fresh kills. He searched for days. Finally, he spotted the animal, and at this moment, Hercules realized the lion's supernatural strength. An arrow, quickly drawn and fired, hit its target in the chest, but it bounced off the thick skin and lay broken on the ground. He wasted no time in attacking the beast again, but a second arrow shattered upon impact. Frustrated, Hercules grabbed his club and made haste after the foe. The lion retreated to a cave. Hercules noticed there were two exits, so he found a boulder and blocked one of them. He then entered the cave with his club at the ready. The lion was tricky and weaved through the many passages, itself ready to strike, but Hercules spotted the beast and ran towards it, striking a mighty blow. This did nothing to harm the lion. It quickly tackled Hercules and wrestled with him. No bared fangs or mighty claws met his flesh, and Hercules was able to gain his footing. He grabbed at the lion and drew the beast close. The animal fought for air as Hercules strangled him with his bare hands. After the fight, our hero tried to skin the animal, but he could not pierce the hide, so he took the entire corpse back to the king. It was then that Eurystheus suggested taking the lion's own claw and using it to pierce the hide. This worked, and Hercules had a new look to show off. Zeus rewarded the lion for its fierceness in battle by placing his body into the sky, and that's how we got the constellation Leo.
Cool.
Oh, very nice. I guess that means, I think Kinley's a Leo, since she was born in late August, so that perfectly describes her journey of life, I think.
And Hercules was actually responsible for the murder of another sign of the Zodiac. Isn't that right, Cammie?
Yes, that is correct. The sign that Peter and I share, which is Cancer. Do we have the dates on Cancer? Does anybody have the dates?
Ooh,
No.
not a fan.
Okay.
Right now.
Yeah, so
Mid-July.
right now, guys, if you're listening later, it's probably not right now, but
June 22nd, July 22nd.
Thank you.
okay. Cool. Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, basically with that, it's a very short story. So Hercules is fighting his second labor, the Hydra, and Hera, who's a very jealous, you know, goddess in general, she finds this little creature on the ground, and it's a crab, and she tells the crab to go over and attack Hercules so he can't win against the Hydra. And the crab does this, he bites his toe, and then Hercules quickly steps on it and kills it. And Hera flings the crab into the sky, and that's how we got Cancer. That was off the top of my head, but
No, that's
listed on
great.
Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Way more interesting than the actual story, probably.
That's really
Maybe,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah, not a particularly heroic character.
Yeah.
Unlike Cammy and myself.
Well, how many? I mean, how many times have either of us fought Hercules? I mean, come on, that was pretty heroic. The tiny crab fighting this huge warrior.
Yeah, it's like, I went on a big hike last week. That was Herculean.
That crab is definitely a Gryffindor.
Excellent. Well, Cammy, thank you for the Nemean lion story of Leo. Peter, I know you've got a combo, right?
Sort of. I'm going to be talking about Scorpio.
Right.
And Scorpio is October 23rd through November 21st on the Zodiac calendar. And Scorpio's story is entangled with the hunter Orion, and Orion is also a really recognizable constellation. So I'm going to be focusing on Orion and his encounter with Scorpio. And I'm using a Roman source. I'm using Ovid's Fasti. So I'm going to be using the Roman name for the gods. So Jupiter is Zeus, Neptune is Poseidon, etc. So, but if you know your Greek mythology, these are going to be very recognizable characters. So the story of Scorpio is inextricably entangled with the story of Orion. One tale follows the other just as their great constellations chase each other across the night sky. In 8 AD, the Roman poet Ovid published the Fasti, often referred to as the Book of Days or on the Roman calendar. The Fasti is a series of poems dedicated to the months of the year, which had been renamed just a few years earlier by Julius Caesar into what we now call the Julian calendar. Ovid pays particular attention to the star formations that dominate the heavens during certain months. On May 11th, he wrote a poem about the great hunter Orion, whose great belt of stars was recognizable to even the most amateur of astronomers. And here's the story of Orion. One day, the gods Jupiter, Neptune, and Mercury were out walking together in Boeotia. They had taken on the appearance of common travelers, and dusk was fast approaching. An old farmer spotted the travelers while plowing his fields. He was about to finish his work for the day and invited the travelers to join him for a simple meal. As they entered the farmer's home, the gods noticed only a small pot of beans and another of garden herbs simmering by the heat of a single smoldering log. The farmer fetched a bottle of young wine and bent to fill the cup of Neptune. By rights, Jupiter should be served first, said the god of the sea. The farmer paled at the mention of Jupiter. He could not serve the gods such a humble meal. The farmer slaughtered his only ox, the one that pulled his plow, and built a great fire to roast the meat. He fetched a bottle of wine he had hidden away when he was still a boy. He brought bales of hay and covered them with linen for the gods to recline on. The gods feasted and drank late into the night. Finally, Jupiter turned to the farmer and offered him a gift. Whatever the man would ask for, Jupiter would give him. The farmer had married his true love, but she had died many years ago. He had sworn never to marry again, but wanted very much to be a father. The gods rose as one and strode outside to where the skin of the ox had been thrown. They each took a turn relieving themselves on the skin. They instructed the farmer to bury the skin, and in 10 months a child would emerge. When they had parted ways with the farmer, and they parted ways with the farmer and resumed their journey. And indeed, in 10 months, a young boy did emerge from the ground where the hide was buried. Never one to pass up an easy joke, Ovid wrote that the boy's father named him Urian because of his crude origins. But, but this pronunciation has fallen from usage. Orion grew quickly and to gigantic proportions, and he was said to be the most handsome of the earthborn. His godlike appetites drove him to become a great hunter. His skill with a bow was nearly unmatched. He also carried a massive club that he used to dispatch large game. In no time at all, he had killed all the wild game in his homeland, and he was cast out and left to wander, searching for adventure. Having been spawned from divine urine, Orion possessed some godlike powers. Orion was gifted with both great size and great strength, and his blessing from Neptune allowed him to walk on water. During his wanderings, he is said to have created the Strait of Sicily by dragging his great club across the Italian peninsula. Eventually, Orion's great skill with a bow and handsome face attracted Diana, the goddess of the hunt. The two became constant companions, traveling and hunting together. Diana's twin brother Apollo became jealous of their relationship and began plotting to rid his sister of Orion's pesky attentions. But it must be done in secret. Diana must never know that Apollo was involved. One day, as Apollo spied down on his twin sister from within a cloud, he heard Orion boast that there was no animal on earth he could not kill. Apollo knew this boast had sealed Orion's fate. Apollo paid a visit to Terra, the goddess of the earth, and told her of Orion's proud claim. Terra was enraged and set about to create a beast to slay the haughty hunter. She began by making a huge armored body, impervious to swords and arrows and bristling with spikes. 6 powerful legs with feet like spearheads would convey the creature across any terrain. 2 massive claws to grip and tear its prey and feed it into its foaming, mandibled mouth. Finally, a whip-like tail tipped with a poisoned spike. She called the creature Scorpio, and she filled it with an unquenchable hatred for the hunter Orion. One day, as Orion and Diana were tracking game, another hunter was following their trail. Scorpio leapt between the pair of hunters and turned its hideous gaze on the proud Orion. Orion tried to bash in the giant's thick armor with his club, while Diana's arrows bounced harmlessly off the creature. The battle raged until all the combatants were nearly exhausted. Finally, Scorpio snatched each of Orion's arms in its crushing claws. A flick of its poisoned tail sent a deadly sting deep into the proud hunter's heart. Orion was dead. Diana carried Orion's body to the halls of Mount Olympus, begging her father Jupiter to place Orion among the stars so she could forever look upon him. Jupiter agreed, but with the condition that Scorpio also be placed in the heavens to memorialize their great battle. And they live there still. Orion can be seen between January and March. The 3 bright stars that form his belt are some of the most recognizable of the constellations. A chain of fainter stars form his sheathed sword, and another chain forms his arm holding aloft his mighty club. Scorpio follows Orion eternally across the night sky. The great scorpion can be seen in July and August. The constellation resembles a great fishing hook, with the tip of the hook forming Scorpio's poison stinger and the great red star Antares burning as his eyes. I feel a certain kinship with this story. When I was a boy, my parents had a sailboat named Orion, so I kind of grew up, hearing stories about him, and they would point out his constellation in the sky. But I never knew some of the the urine story. I thought was I've never encountered that before.
That's really good. I like that a lot. Yeah. Okay, so now's my turn, and what I'm not talking about a specific horoscope. I kind of wanted to look into all of this stuff in general, and I say that because it's hard to like pinpoint. Am I talking about horoscopes? Am I talking about zodiacs? Am I talking about astrology? Yes, that's the answer. And I'm gonna try. I'm gonna make an attempt to for everyone who listens to this to walk away a little more knowledge on all of this. So, but bear with me because this is extremely deep, and the reason why it's extremely deep is because all of this dates back to like the third millennium. This is when our modern Western and Eastern zodiac signs date to, and that's the Sumero-Babylonian cultures of Mesopotamia. That's where it really roots down to. I mean, this was a time of humanity really rising up, civilization rising up. The Sumerians had a great writing system, early writing system that the Babylonians inherited in a lot of ways, and the astrology was important. I mean, that you look up and you see the same patterns and systems, and so you find the patterns, you name them, and it helps you identify things and helps you move. It helps you move, it helps you study them, and then in a nutshell, so when a kid's born, you look up at the sky, you see sort of you've named these zodiacs, these quadrants of the heavens. And when your kid's born, you kind of look and see what the, I guess you could say like imaginary, the lines that you've sort of made, the quadrants that you've made, the planes that you've identified. And you're like, oh, well, I can see the ram, the Aries, so my kid, he's going to headbutt someone one day. That's kind of.
Is that how it works?
That's it. So guys, thanks for listening to Mythstorie. That's it in a nutshell. That's Bryant's version of the history, but it is true. So from the Sumerians and then the Babylonians, the ancient Hellenes inherited all of this as well. And this goes through along many years, but the Hellenes sort of take this. What's interesting, so I copied. Now I'll go over my sources too, because I kept it pretty simple. I tried to go kind of deep, but it's impossible. You've got to go to the Britannica, Wikipedia. There's a good website that I found, ancientknowledge.com. That's pretty awesome, right? And then it was funny too, because there's this. When I was searching, I found this funny website thing. It's spaceplace.nasa.gov, and it's like a explanation of astrology for kids. And it has really funny, like 2003 clip art on the website, and I really like that. But when I was looking through, there's a great table on Wikipedia that shows you some astrological signs, and it'll give you the Latin, Greek, English translation, Sanskrit name, and Sumero-Babylonian name, and the similarities are striking. So. The lion, the Nemean lion story that Cami just regaled us is the Greek version of the Sumero-Babylonian, because this quadrant, this zodiac, this piece of the sky was already named lion by the Sumero-Babylonians, and this is their explanation of it. And this pretty much serves the same. So the Babylonian name for the constellation of Cancer is as a Sumerian Babylonian word for crayfish. And this goes on and on. Gemini, the ancient name is great twins. It goes on like that. So
that's so interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, so you may think that it's like, oh, the Greeks, but it's, yes, the Greeks really started. I mean, obviously because their writing system and just the way how history and time works, we're able to recover those from them. but their stories are rooted in this ancient naming that was already there. So I like to think Cammy and I just did an episode coming up soon on Medusa, and we talk about how ancient the concept of the Gorgon is and how it really predates the Hellenes. And this made me think of that, like maybe the Gorgon was some kind of a like Sumerian thing that just a monster that passed down. Anyway,
that's fascinating. It's like these stories, already existed. And they're like, well, hey, why don't we make this a Hercules story? It's
exactly.
It's like the story was already there, and they just kind of fill in the blanks with whatever gods or heroes they
that were applicable at the time. Absolutely.
So cool.
Yeah, and Ovid, Ovid's a great. I'm really glad you did Ovid's, because that's a great, skip hundreds more years and then you're still discussing it and stuff like that. But we discussed it's tough to. So I had to kind of like dumb it down for myself to kind of get into it. So there's the Zodiac is the naming of these constellations. It's the identification of these constellations, and it was important to do that just because, I mean, to name the world, that's like geography in a sense, and astrology was the ancient form of geography for the sky, for the heavens. So it's good to identify the world around you, and it's meaningful, and you see these patterns. It makes it easier, and then your culture will get injected into that, of course. And that's kind of the astrology. Now, astrology is extremely prevalent today. Some people think it's a total hoax. Some people do not. Whole cultures are really focused on it, especially in Asia, all throughout Asia, as in East, West, India, China, obviously. There are different kind of versions of zodiacs, but what's interesting is sort of like everyone. It was so important to get this knowledge. So everyone at many old civilizations did this. They did identify, and they all kind of follow similar stories. What's
Does
really cool.
Everyone know what their Chinese zodiac is?
I don't.
Do you, Peter?
I don't, and they're in like a different. They have whole.
Yeah,
like it's an entire
like
year.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a cock.
Of course.
Right. So and that's what's. So yeah, it goes on, and usually the patterns are either that it's a 12. There's 12 zodiac or 12 constellations that like this. So you kind of have like the horoscope, which comes from a Greek word meaning like time observer, aura skopos. So if you kind of look at like an image of like the Earth and the constellations, it'll kind of look kind of like a clock in a way, and in the way that the constellations are patched out, and there's sort of like an arrow pointing to the constellation. So that's kind of how oh, I'm a Scorpio because the arrow was pointing at Scorpio when I was born, that kind of thing. That's kind of the way of like these imaginary lines, the planes, the way it's designated and stuff like that. And for zodiac, the meaning of it is the Roman Latinized version of the Greek. For Romans, it was zodiacus. Greek, it was zodiakos kyklos, which was cycle or circle of little animals. So
that is so cute.
And the Greek and zoion is a Greek word meaning animal. So the zodiakos is like a diminutive version, which brings me to it wouldn't be an episode of Mythstorie if I didn't mention a video game or anime or something like that. When I read that, I immediately thought of the old anime. It's not super prevalent now. Zoids. Do you guys remember this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't.
So it's basically, I know Gundam, Cammy, the Japanese anime,
they're like
robots in space fighting. Yeah, you're piloting them. Very dramatic. Zoids was like a younger version of that, more kid like preteeny friendly, and it was just set on Earth for the most part. And the Gundams, instead of being like humanoid mech suits, they were based off of animals. So you'd be piloting like a tiger mech, a giant tiger mech that had weapons and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, Zoids, that's coming from this Greek zoion, Anyway, that was my aside. This concludes Brian's anime reference for the podcast. Yeah, I just thought that was really cool. But going on, so I hope we have an understanding of sort of the zodiac is sort of the naming of the constellation. It's this identification system. Horoscope is this observation of this placement. That's kind of the generalization. Now there is astrological horoscope astrology. That's the word I was looking for. There is horoscope astrology, which kind of does infringe on the modern astronomy. It tries to sort of explain and observe around the 17th century, when with the prominence of heliocentrism and the Enlightenment coming, the shift away from astrology started to occur, and sort of, it's tough. Astrology is very injected with the mysticism and religious and faith based parts of astrology. So, and again, this was the secularization of sciences and things like that was more popular. And so we have this modern take. I hope, think what you will, if the email that you get from horoscope.com matters. For a lot of people it does, but there's a deep rooted importance. I mean, astronomy today, God, we wouldn't be able to name, so many of our names for stars and planets come from the ancient times, these periods, and a lot of this is just kind of, astrology did half the homework. We just sort of changed the direction of how things go. I'm not going to talk about what astronomy is because I don't know, other than the basic what it is.
So, well, you kind of made reference to it, like, when these stories were taking shape, there was this perception that everything revolved around the Earth, and of course during the Enlightenment, like as you mentioned, the heliocentric, that the thing that we're actually orbiting the sun, but we still hang on to a lot of celestial ideas that were established back then. The idea of the spheres moving, and
right. And that's a big thing. Like, there's this thing called the precession of the equinoxes. A big thing too. I mentioned that a lot of the societies would have either 12 or 24 sort of like constellation, like zodiac maps for this phenomenon, or this explanation. There's actually a 13th one that the Babylonians decided to just kind of like, this doesn't fit, so we're not going to actually talk about it. It's what is it? Ophiricus. There's a 13th constellation. Like if you yeah. So but like it doesn't fit well, so they just kind of like they divide it evenly into 12, so that way it works. And that was that goes back to the Babylonians. The Greeks were like, yep, that works too. 13's not fun.
Before Caesar made 2 extra months, weren't there 10? I'm pretty sure there were 10.
There could have been a recognition of 10. Well, then, if you think, I mean, these were all. It just depends on the perspective.
But it was like added to the zodiac later.
Well, but it was recognized in the Babylonian Sumero zodiac and the Hellenistic.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. No, all the Babylonians for sure recognized we know from ancient writings, cave scribbles, tablets, that there were 13 constellations, but when dividing them, the way you want to, 12 just works. It just fits better as an even number, and it's easier to divide it up.
Getting my cancer information from Wikipedia.
No, and if you look around, it works. Again, like it gets at things. It all depends on the culture and the time period, and I'll kind of go in, because there is Hindu astrology, which it's really there's a little side here I have. Hindu astrology is really interesting because this French historian who died in 1799, his name was Montucla. He posited that the Greek Empire state of Bactria, which had kind of a connection to India, it was sort of in that Mesopotamia area. Through that connection, that Greek Empire connection to India, the populations that were in India at that time inherited and took in the Greek concepts of zodiac and astrology in a sense. So Hindu zodiac is what it's called. And what's really cool is while the names are extremely different and the symbolisms, the symbol, one of the zodiac is Danu, which means bow, and it corresponds directly to Sagittarius, which is depicted holding an archer, and Kumbha means water pitcher and corresponds to Aquarius, the water carrier. Wow. So there's a bunch of direct connections. So I mean, like you can draw a line from Sumero-Babylonian zodiac all the way into a sprouting root system that goes to Hindu, Greek, and even during like a lot of Arab-based nations, like astrology and things like that were forbidden, but it was kind of necessary to like at least know where the stars are because you're traveling at night in the desert and stuff like that. And they kind of borrowed these working systems as well for identification. And of course, a huge one is the Chinese zodiac, which is ultra complicated in a lot of ways. And it's the ancient knowledge.net website, or Ancient Wisdom. It does say that there's a suggestion of China inheriting the Indo-European concept. That's totally plausible because of a lot of, it's very plausible, but I don't think I couldn't find anything that really definitively showed us a connection other than just really old history time. That's really it. So, but the timeline of when the zodiac system actually became prominent, it kind of makes sense. We actually talked about in the Guan Yu episode we just did on the main show of the Han Dynasty, which predates like 200 BC to 200 AD, and that's actually when the Chinese zodiac and astrology really flourished and became what it is known today. Really cool though. There aren't too many other connections other than 12. There's some other unique things that make it its own, that really separate it from Western astrology and zodiac understandings and stuff like that. So guys, I think that essentially takes what I wanted to cover. I feel like I've barely scratched the surface, but I think what I wanted to do for myself was kind of understand the difference between zodiac, horoscope, and astrology. Because they seemed very interchangeable, and in some ways they are, and they're all related, but they're sort of independent too. As well, and especially like astrology is its own sort of thing. I think of it what you will. There's different versions of it. What I didn't realize, there's natal, mundane, electional, horary. These are different methods that astrologers use. So it's extremely.
My friends are always that are into this are always asking, "What time were you born?" Like.
Yeah. What time of day? And
I don't know.
Right.
I don't have any idea.
Yeah,
I was there, so but I don't remember.
One of the astrology, like one of the four main branches of astrology is mundane, which I thought was funny. But mundus is a Roman word meaning the world. So if something is mundane, that's kind of the etymology there, and it kind of corresponds things like an earth, like geological phenomena and the heavens. So like when an earthquake happened, you quickly look up at the sky and you're like, wait, what's there? What's the imaginary arrow pointing at, or the invisible arrow pointing at?
Right.
Right. So it's cool. Again, there's super, regardless of what you think of astrology, if you think it's a hoax or whatever, it's super rooted. It's insane, the dissemination of the zodiac into all cultures in a way, and the prevalence of it all today is extremely apparent. So my ramble is over. Go watch Zoids. That's the conclusion of this. It's a really fun anime, friendly for kids, but it's got some adult themes too that are really cool. So
awesome.
Right, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I had a couple of final thoughts. We could certainly come back to this. I feel like, again, like we've just kind of scratched the surface. There are 9 more, Zodiac characters that we haven't addressed. And just kind of a final thought, something I've been thinking about. If you had to boil down like the essential theme of this podcast, it's about like exploring how the interconnectedness of all these world myths. And I think what we're seeing here, and I've never thought about this before, these might be some of the oldest stories ever. I mean, like, you can think back to, before written records, before we have anything, even before cave painting, before maybe even the control of fire, that looking up at the stars and connecting them and forming stories might be like one of the oldest forms of storytelling in human history. It's amazing.
Well,
right.
The sky is like the biggest thing in your
Yeah.
world.
It's a text. The sky is writing that wasn't able to get pillaged or broken or decay, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's a really great point, Peter. We talk about the word mytheme a lot on the show, and a mytheme is sort of these recurring ideas, and it's sort of, this is kind of flips that in a way, because it's more of the sky as a base for all the stories, because you identify a shape, you give that shape a story, and again, it's so essential to map the world, to understand the world, so you can just survive in it and navigate. And it's just cool how the story, like the cancer was always this crustacean thing, but it changes for many. So yeah, what a great point, Peter. Thanks.
Good stuff.
Yeah, so I was just, Brian, I'm a little bit disappointed that you didn't accuse Ted Kaczynski of being the Zodiac killer.
Yeah.
But that's
well,
really
I think he's still around. He's currently in American politics, I believe. Isn't that correct?
No, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
No, I know. I remember, the joke is Ted Cruz. Yeah.
Yeah, that was his dad, right? That was the Zodiac?
No, I don't think so. I think
it was
he's
him. I don't know.
Right.
he was like a
good.
Baby.
That tracks.
Right.
I mean, if there's any baby that could be a serial killer, it's Ted Cruz.
Right. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Cammie, thanks for coming on the show again for 51 episodes straight. Peter,
Not
it's
a problem. On my birthday, no less.
Right. Yes. Please wish Cammie and Peter happy birthday, belatedly or not. Well, guys, and Peter, thank you as well. Your stories are always fantastic. We really appreciate it. And everyone, Mythstorie with an IE. Please let us know what you think. Our Facebook group is picking up pace. You can take a look at us there. We do have an infancy stage Reddit that's working its way up to being something better. And you can always email us at mythstorie@gmail.com. We always appreciate any just feedback for the show or any suggestions that you have for myths. Especially, we are really looking for local myths. We recently did a episode called Suburban Legends. If you haven't listened to that, it was really, really fun. And it was all like locally sourced, smaller kind of bite-sized stories. So please check that out. That was a lot of fun. And let us know your stories. They can really be anything. So thanks again, everyone. We will see you next time.
Oh.